There's not very many people that have enough coin in their pocket to educate their family, put roof over their heads, build up for their retirement. All those things that most of us aspire to are done with the help of financial institutions. Banks weren't always making the types of profits that they make now, and that's evolved for good and bad over the decades. Business banking is all about the 3 C's of banking. Capital, the bank only gets repaid on its debt. Capacity, that enables you to service the debt. And the important thing is, and that's the art of banking. I don't want to give my personal guarantee. To a banker is, well, why don't you want to give your personal
what's
guarantee?
the reason behind
What's the reason behind that? That's a flag to say, I don't want to stand behind my business.
Should I know how to drive a cash flow, a profit and loss and a balance sheet? Or is that something my accountant should be able to do?
No, I believe that that's something that you should be able to do. It's like your personal finances. You need to know, are you living within your means? You need to know, can I afford that investment property? It's the same with business. The opportunities that come along might appear lucrative, but unless you know your numbers, you can get caught in that classic over trading. Many businesses have gone out of business with full order books.
You got the gig as Managing Director,
CEO,
CEO of Heritage Bank, and help us. Like I've chipped into the middle part of your career. We can waft around a bit, but unpick that sort of member
journey. It probably. I had a career that went through 2 stints with the National Australia Bank, a really good stint with yourself at CBA, and then St. George. And St. George was a really interesting organisation because it used to be a building society.
It did.
It demutualised and listed, but it was still a challenger bank which had a really good culture and still carried a lot of that old mutuality of putting the customer at the centre. It was so it was quite different than working for the monolith CBA. And when I left, St. George merged with Westpac. And that was a clash of cultures. You had this quite collegiate culture, which I found at St. George, versus a fairly fierce competitor from profit-driven culture at Westpac. And there was always a little bit of not quite as comfortable in that
not the best fit.
But then when I had the opportunity to go into the customer-owned sector via Heritage, I found all of those things that I liked and loved about doing the right thing by the customer. Banking is a very noble profession. There's not very many people that have enough coin in their pocket to educate their family, put roof over their heads, build up for their retirement. All those things that most of us aspire to are done with the help of financial institutions. And it's really sad to see bad behaviour as demonstrated through the Royal Commission come out, which is driven by greed and capital appreciation profit motives, where that's not what happens in the customer-owned sector. They're member-owned institutions. They are not giving dividends, so you're driven by a much longer-term value proposition than the short-termism that happens in some of those other institutions.
So they're like cooperatives?
They are. They're effectively cooperatives. So they are part of the mutual and cooperative sector, the CME, the Cooperative and Mutual Enterprises, CME group.
So there's no conflict of interest in a way because they're dealing with the people that are their members.
Correct. And if you don't have conflict of interest, then you don't have conduct risk because you're not making decisions that are based on your benefit. You're making decisions that are always based on the member benefit. And that to me is a really fantastic value proposition, but also very, very motivating, very energizing to come to work and to say, I can make a decision that will bear fruit in a couple of years, not need to bear fruit in a couple of months.
So the horizon at which you're working in is very different.
It is, It doesn't mean that you're not commercial. It doesn't mean that you're not tough about how the business has to be run. It still needs to be profitable. It's still regulated in exactly the same way as any other bank is regulated. But the motive is different. You're after your customers' interests.
So that's interesting. So when you went to Heritage, which was one of those banks, member based, it sounds like you fitted in quite well there because of that early history of you know, the ethics and treating everyone as they should be treated.
Correct. Yeah.
From a early family background.
It's that, and also the way that I was taught banking very early on with the National Australia
Was
Bank,
it?
which
Yeah.
was, customers are really everything, which was their care program.
Yeah.
Seems to have been lost over decades, but that's how we were taught. Banks weren't always making the types of profits that they make now. They were regulated differently, but they certainly had different motivations. And that's evolved for good and bad over the decades. But again, what I'm saying, the basis of the profession of banking, when you're looking after people's money, that's an honour to be given that responsibility, and you've got to take it seriously.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've known you for a number of years, and we crossed paths very much in the business banking field. And I imagine your early sort of experience in business banking came from the NAB.
Yes. Yep.
And they certainly were well regarded in the business banking side, perhaps much more so than CBA, which was traditionally more of a home lending bank.
Yep.
If you reflect back on what you learned in business banking, thinking about a business today and a business owner, what are the three things, if they're looking for finance or they're looking for a long-term relationship with their banker, what are the three things that a business person should be practicing well to ensure that relationship works well for them, do you think?
Yeah. Well, the business banking is all about relationships. And one of the difficulties for business owners is that a lot of those business banking relationships are very difficult to maintain because the bankers churn around. And therefore it's hard for that decision. It comes back in the principles of the 3 C's of banking, right? So it's capital. You've got to have enough capital. It's the bank only gets repaid on its debt. It doesn't get to participate in the profit. So you've got to have hurt money in there. You've got to have capacity or cash flow that enables you to service the debt. And you've got to have the character, right? So don't worry about the 4th C, which is collateral, right? So bankers that are interested in what security you've got, it's the wrong question. The question has got to be, have you got skin in the game? Can you repay the debt? And the important thing is character. Are you somebody that's going to repay my money? And that's the art of banking, of working out when I'm sitting with James and looking at his business, is James going to let me down? Or is James going to have the type of values that's saying, I understand where the bank sits and how the bank is going to support me, but I've also got to do my part. And when things don't go right, that's your responsibility, not the bank's responsibility. So, you've got to pay back your obligations.
So that's really interesting because character is nothing about numbers, right?
No.
Is it?
No.
But banking today, a cynic would say it's all done in a black box and it's automated. And these relationships, they talk about relationships, but I'm a business customer and I hardly ever see them, and they change their name before they and they don't tell me, and there's just this, we were talking about it before. But you're saying those 3 C's are still important.
I think they are fundamental, but they are not necessarily captured in the automated lending decisions. So automated lending decisions work well if you are home lending, for example. Where it does come down to, can you repay your debt? Is the house there? Is there a good loan to value ratio? And these things spit out, and the character around home lending is a little bit different because of the psyche of people will do whatever it takes to, maintain their home. But it's a little bit different with other lending, and that's where you've got to make that that judgment.
Yeah.
And this is where it comes down to question in business banking. Do I give, guarantees, or, I don't want to give my personal guarantee?
Yeah. Yeah.
To a banker, is, well, why don't you want to give your personal
Yeah. What's the
guarantee?
reason behind
What's the
it?
reason behind that?
You're not going to stand behind your business?
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's a flag to say, I don't want to stand behind my business. If something goes wrong, I want to walk away and let you stand behind, the bank stand behind it. So that's always a red flag. So you are looking, and I guess to come back to those questions, what are you looking for? You're looking for people that understand their business, really understand it. Understand the horizon as well. So they're forward thinking. They understand what the competitive nature of their business is, what the competitive advantage of the business is. And if they are investing, because most of the time when they're looking for a bank assistance, you've got two types. You've got your operating debt, to your operating cycles or your cash flow, and you've got your investment cycle. So you're borrowing for investment. So understanding what's the return on that investment, how quickly will that come up to production, if it's manufacturing, for instance, and how quickly will that pay off. So looking for people that really understand the business. And then the other thing that I always look for is the governance structure and how good they are with their admin. So are they on top of, when you're asking for figures or you're asking for information, is it there, or is it scratching around?
Does it have to be produced, sometime later and takes time?
Haven't got that. People that really understand their business are on top of their numbers, on top of their obligations. They understand. You almost get an instant feel for whether this is a business that you want to bank or not.
So if I'm a business person, should I know how to drive a cash flow, a profit and loss, and a balance sheet, or is that something my accountant should be able to do?
No, I believe that that's something that you should be able to do.
Really?
So you can have your accountant helping you, but it's like your personal finances. Right? Yeah. So you're on top of your personal finances. It doesn't mean you have to balance your checkbook, if you're using an old analogy, but you need to know, are you living within your means? You need to know what you're doing, where your cash flow is, what your statement of position is at any one time. And you know that when you're looking for personal investments. So can I afford that house? Can I afford that investment property? Can I afford that new car? Should I go on that holiday?
Yes.
All of those things you're looking at to say, I've got school fees due, I've got this due and got that due. Yeah, I can do that, or maybe I can't. It's the same with business.
Yeah.
One of the big challenges with business is, that opportunities that come along might appear lucrative, but unless you know your numbers, you can get caught in that classic overtrading situation. Whereas, you take all the orders on, but you don't understand the drivers and how much it costs
to afford those orders, to make them churn through your business to make a profit.
Yeah, and many, many businesses have gone out of business with full order books.
So touching on the cash flow aspect there, and I remember at CBA, one of the areas that you focused on was the business assets finance, which was about, financing businesses using security other than bricks and mortar, largely.
Correct.
Are we still struggling in Australia to do that well, or do you feel that we're making ground on that? Because I feel like a lot of small to mid-sized businesses still have to use resi security to sit behind some of their business risk, if you like. But do you think banks and businesses are understanding that form of security better now?
No, not really. I don't think. If I looked at it, there are elements of in the finance cycle that are better. There's more acceptance of products that used to be called factoring, for example. That was maybe a dirty word.
What it was back in the day, for whatever reason.
But now it's a more legitimate form of financing, and there's a good way of doing that. But full-on cash flow financing, I think businesses would still struggle. But it's like anything. If you've got a critical mass, then it's fine. It's those businesses that are in between
Yes.
that find it hard to get to that stage where the business is sustaining itself
Yeah, that's right.
on its cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are many businesses that do. There's some really, really good businesses, but I think we're still struggling between going from the small to the medium
Yes.
and making that jump from, okay, I want to release my personal securities. I was happy to do that to get my
To get it
business
going.
to get it going.
Yep.
I think I'm now mature enough for the business to stand by itself, and I still think we've got some way to go there. There are some good opportunities, and I know there's a lot of good financiers that are concentrating on it and doing a good job on it.
Yeah, but
And
we're
we'll do a good job
not as far down that track as we could be.
I don't think so.
As a business customer, as someone in business, a business owner, small, wanting to go middle, wanting to release that security.
Yeah.
You're sort of suggesting, well, the market's not perfect in terms of having products for you to allow that to happen. But what could that business customer do, in your view, to shore up their position?
I think it's one of confidence. So one of the things that I always look for and advise is getting good advice. So having good advisors, so spending the money on good accountants, good lawyers, if you need lawyers, but mainly good accountants that understand the cash flow and get the business to a point where they can present those artifacts and the cash flows to bankers, showing that this is
it's a bankable item.
It's a sound proposition.
Yeah.
And it gives a lot of confidence, I think. Also, it's also one of the things I look for when I'm talking to business. Who's your advisors? Right?
Yeah, right.
Who's giving you that information? Who's preparing your financials and making sure that you've got things that are done correctly? Looking to make sure that your tax is up to date, your statutory obligations are up to date, that you understand all these things, that you're not in arrangements with the tax office. And some advisors would say, well, that's a legitimate form of financing. I've made made an arrangement to.
I've got a payment plan with with Mr. ATO.
Yeah, that's a red flag. So it's a big red flag to a banker. So that's not a good thing.
That's interesting. They're health factors, right? In your mind, from what I hear. We value a lot of businesses for all sorts of reasons. Some to do with banking and finance, others to do with succession and exit, others, just to do with performance. How's my business performing now, and what are the levers I can pull to improve it? If you had to mention three things that you would look at when valuing a business, are there any particular ones that you think are predictors of value?
I always would be interested to see what the market is doing, or what the competitive position is doing. So you would appreciate this, James, a cash flow or a position from one year to the next can dramatically change if the market changes. So obviously everything's in its industry defined, but there's so much competition going on that I owned a video store which is going very well, but look what happened. Suddenly
no more.
So those external factors, I think, are the biggest factors at the moment to say, has this business got a sustainable business? Now, in a private business, then is that tied up, or is the intellect or the value of the business tied up in the owner's head, or is it tied up on the factory floor? And that's another one. Who's got the
jewels?
Who's got the jewels? And to see how that goes, and then the consistency of performance. So it's very, very easy to value something that's been punching out the same type of widget or the same type of value, and then seeing whether that is can be improved or will it be sustained. But if the performance is going up and down, then it's easy to cook the books in a certain way to get a value up, which is not sustainable. So those valuations I would look over a period of time to see, is that a value that is built around sustainable earnings.
So 3 things: external market factors and changes, owner risk, concentration around the jewels. And the third one was sustainable earnings and sustainable performance, consistency over a long run period.
Yeah, over a long run period.
Yeah.
And then being able, you should be able to, you're going to get blips, but you should be able to explain those blips away, because, that might have been, well, I invested here, or there might have been some mishap that's out of your control, but you can see it, you can normalise those results over a period of time. But if they're just going up and down, it says that there's something else going on in that business. It's not a sustainable value. So
I like that, and thank you for those tips. It reflects on a business that we're doing a due diligence on for a client at the moment. The business is based in Adelaide. It's a food services, food wholesaling business, roughly sort of 10 mil turnover, long run business, EBITDA margin, earnings before interest, tax and depreciation, between 3 and 4% of revenue.
Yep.
And my client's looking to buy it for 2.5, 3 mil plus stock.
Yep.
And I just spoke to my analyst before we came in here, who's been crunching the numbers, and I've reviewed all these numbers, and he's done a good job. There's some gaps. And I said, I've seen all your numbers, but I said, and my analyst is in his early 20s, but he's a sharp lad. He's still finishing off his uni, but he's got some smarts around the business. And I said, I've seen your numbers and appreciate what you've done, but what's your gut feel? Would you buy this business? I said, the business is, supposedly worth 2.5 mil. If you were in Adelaide and wanted a food services business, wholesaling business, would you buy it for that? And he said, my feel is that the business is about tapped out on its assets, and it hasn't spent money on its assets, and it's got a high return on assets, but the margin's been decreasing over 4 years, and I just don't know how much more it can grow. And I think it's going to have a whole bunch of capital investment to do anything. So he said, my gut feel is, and he said, interesting to your point before about consistency, he said, they've taken on sales growth, but they don't seem to have got the margin. Now, does that mean that they've got into a market that they would otherwise have not got into? But to the extent of that new business, can they ratchet up the margin? Don't know, because the figures don't show it.
Yep.
Right? And so he's sitting there saying, James, frankly, I'd be very nervous. That's my gut feel.
Yep.
And does banking still have gut feel?
I think it is art and science, and a good experienced banker. That's where it comes from, experience, and you get the experience, particularly in business banking, on relationships. Right? You're sitting around talking to people. You work out. You've seen many businesses. You work out whether they're doing the right thing, whether the person's going to dud you or not. If they come forward on their commitments, because you're managing their cash flow. You're still bouncing their paper. If they're not
exactly.
So if they're not within their limits. So I think it does come down to gut feel. Certainly, I know that now I'm at the end of my career.
I understand.
In that way, but mine was largely based on this is a good deal. These people are going to do the right thing.
It's all about communication, isn't it, then, Pat?
Well, it's about experience as well. And
having seen scenarios before in different clients and different industries.
Correct. You've seen it, you've experienced it, and exactly what you've said, it comes down to a gut feel that looks all right on paper, but I'm not too sure. You don't always get those gut feels right. I've made calls that said, no, I don't think that business is good. I remember one, I won't name it, but one of my colleagues said, this is a great deal. I said, no, I don't think it's, my gut feel just says Yeah, I'm not too sure it was. Turned out to be, I was wrong. It was a great business. Yeah.
But
Still gone on to be a great business.
yeah, but you made a call on it, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And that's part of your experience now.
Yeah. And that particular colleague, even though it was a long time ago, reminds me of it every time I see him. And he was right, I was wrong. Yeah.
You've been CEO of Heritage Bank and then
People First Bank.
People First Bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which Heritage is now part of.
Well, it was a merge between Heritage and People's Choice.
Right.
And that happened 2 years ago, where we bought those two banks together.
Yes.
And created the largest mutual bank in Australia with that, and then created and brought to the market only a couple of months ago the new brand of People First Bank. So it's the first, I think, truly national mutual player with operations in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Northern Territory.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would you put that on the top of your list of professional achievements?
Yeah. Yeah.
You would?
Yeah. Well, that merger, that's the largest mutual merger in Australia's history. It was, I think, done. Very, very proud of this, James. When we put two organisations, very similar sizes, it was a merger of equals.
Yeah.
Very similar size when we put it together. But most of these mergers, whether they be in listed or in unlisted space, don't happen because of vested interests. Because you've got to have one CEO, there's one chair out of the two. So to get boards together and then executive together where people are likely to lose their status and position is difficult. So very proud of the fact that we, Steve Laidlaw, who was the CEO of People's Choice, and myself as CEO of Heritage, got together. We took a view that a correct view that the market was changing quite dramatically, that smaller institutions would find it more difficult to survive. Scale is an important part of banking. Technology is an important part of banking. And we said that this has to come together. And to do that, we had to get member approval. Yeah. But we tackled the big questions first. We sat down and said, who's going to be CEO? Who's going to be chair? What the executive's going to look like? Yeah. We looked at the sacred cows and said, we don't mind if the names go. We loved Heritage Bank. Yeah. We loved People's Choice. Said if this is going to work, the brands get retired and a new brand gets invented. We said mutuality was important. We said South Australia was important. Queensland was important. Yeah. We put all those ground rules down first, and then built it from there. And we did it really, really well. Very, very smooth.
Requires a lot of trust though, doesn't it?
It does. And both organisations, importantly, have very similar values. You could have taken the strategy decks from either organisation and changed the name. Yeah. And you would have been comfortable. Because they were based on values and based on very, very similar outlooks for where the industry was going and about what was important about serving the members' interests.
So is there a risk that you have scale for scale's sake?
No, well, yes, there is, but you've got to, in banking, scale is important because of technology. Yeah. So you have to make decisions, correct decisions around your technology stack. And to do that, scale is important to enable that because technology is expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
But unless you recognize, in banking particularly, unless you recognize that it's the technology that will ultimately drive your success, then you've got one of your fundamental foundations incorrect.
Yeah, okay.
So you've really got to look at that, and that's both organisations knew that. Both organisations knew that
they were already there. They'd sold themselves on the need for technology.
Correct. Yeah. Now, People's Choice probably a little bit further advanced on that. We both came to the same decision. They got to the execution of that decision a little quicker than Heritage, but it was very easy. As it turned out, the technology stack that People's Choice had chosen, Heritage had independently also chosen.
Yeah, right.
So it was,
Wow.
it was,
The stars really lined up.
it was
Didn't
stars lined up. But scale is important that way because the technology that banks require now has to be platform-based, cloud-based, has to be evergreen, scalable, and it's expensive. So you need scale to offset the cost of it.
I understand. I mean, I often hear business people being advised, you got to get scale, you got to get scale, you got to get scale. And I think in some ways there's a race around turnover as a result. But what I do also see is that earnings don't necessarily flow at the bottom line. So should they focus on the bottom line or the top line or both in terms of scale?
Well, it depends
on the industry.
It depends on your industry and depends on what the main drivers are. In banking, you would find that a lot of traditional bankers are looking for market share.
Yeah.
So they're looking for what's my market share, or how am I growing my growth of my assets or my growth of my liabilities.
Yeah.
So deposits and loans at greater than system. So if the system is growing at 2 times, then you want to be growing at 3 times,
Yeah.
meaning that you're growing your
book.
balance sheet.
Yeah.
That's not how I look at it.
Yeah.
I look at it as in the key component in our industry is customers. So you have to be growing your customer base, not necessarily your lending base. So you've got to look at the proposition as to why people are choosing you to bank with
Over
versus somebody else.
Right.
So a bank like People First Bank has combined about 750,000 members, all of varying ages, but a lot of those are in an older demographic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to split your customer base and look at the demographics. And this same analogy will work on whatever the driver is of the business. But if you've got 750,000 clients that are aged between 40 and 60, or a big proportion of those 40 and 60, then the natural life cycle means they're going to die out. So unless you've got a proposition that's attractive to the 20 and 30-year-olds coming through, your base won't grow. So that means you've got to be looking at what's the new generation of customer want.
And have you got an offering to?
Have you got the offering? Have you got the technology that they'll be looking for?
Yeah.
You've got a big whack of older population that like traditional branches, for example. 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds have never been into a bank branch in their life. They don't understand.
What is it?
What is it? What do they do? Right? They don't know. So they want an app that does these things. Now, unless you've got the technology that can keep up to date with the best applications, the best products, best security features, the ease, the constant up of the thing, not breaking down all of the time, might be foreign to a lot of your existing base. But it's like 2 engines.
Yeah.
You got your old engine and you've bought it out as much as you can, and it's just not going to give you anything more. And you've got this new engine that you've got to build that's going to be the new horsepower of the bank. And
so you've got to think about both.
You got to think about both.
Those levers about how you pull the investment around each.
Yeah, and therefore, when I'm looking, obviously balance sheet is important. The growth of the book is important, but the thing that grows that, the petrol that grows that, or makes the engine work, is the customer. So unless I'm attracting new customers at a faster clip, then it's not successful.
Yeah, I like that. And I think there's some analogies, albeit different industries and different drivers. There's a lot of analogies with other businesses there.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, if I was to talk to your executive team most recent, and you've just retired from your position as CEO, but if I was to say to them, listen, what's this Peter Locke like as a leader? What are the things that come to mind? 3 quick things that they would say to me straight down the line. Do you think?
I think they would say energetic.
Right.
Customer focused.
Yes.
Considered.
Considered. Yeah.
And considered is important. for a leader, I think you want to see consistency. You want to see somebody that listens, that takes alternate views, and that will consider alternate views, and will adjust accordingly, but is not open to outbursts and irrational type of behaviour.
So someone that's even-tempered.
Even-tempered, listens, prepared to change, prepared to accept an argument, and welcomes a contrary opinion.
View, yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you're going to accept it.
Yeah.
Because being in charge means you've got to make decisions.
Yes, yes.
But it does mean that you'll give people the opportunity to have a counter view. And I can't remember, was it a Winston Churchill quote that said, you can't change anything if you can't change your mind?
Yeah, well, check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's what it is. So you've got to always be open to, well, I've heard it. I think, maybe that's the right way of doing it. And being considered, to me, also means that you're not impulsive. You will,
thoroughly work
through things, consider it. You might take things on notice, say, okay, well, just let me think about that.
So you haven't worked under Winston Churchill, but you've worked under a number of MDs and CEOs of large banks.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you were at CBA at the time of David Murray.
Yep.
St George, Westpac, was that Gale?
Gale
Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
NAB in the early days, would that have been, who would have been?
Don Argus.
Don.
Okay. In there, Frank Secudo, Nobby Clark.
Nobby Clark, yeah. So can you reflect on those, and did you pick up anything from those situations? All different, I guess, in terms of your position and what you've seen. But I mean, who have you modelled yourself on, really?
If I was going to reflect on that, I think the closest CEO that I worked with, remembering that a lot of those others, I was a
junior person, yes.
But it would be probably Gail Kelly, the one that I worked closely with as a CEO, and just the energy that came in, and always the consistency of approach. And I again come back to the consistency, and being consistent means that you don't have to think about, I've said one thing here and one thing the other. You're just consistent. You're honest. You're transparent.
Yes.
People know, and I think your leadership team are comfortable when they know where they sit. They know that you're not flighty, or you're not vindictive, or you're not anything of that type of nature. You just listen and try and make the best decision for the organisation and the best decision for the members.
Yeah, having the pleasure of working alongside Gail for a period before she moved up and on, but as a colleague, I definitely know what you're saying there. I mean, she was a supreme communicator.
Yep.
A very smart banker or business person, but a supreme communicator. And I think and communication shouldn't go without saying, but it's a two-way thing, and it needs to genuinely feel that, which is what you're kind of intimating with the sort of the honesty and just the consistency of approach.
Yeah.
So interested to hear.
It's also important, I think, as a leader, that you're interested. You're generally interested in the business, you're interested in the people that you're working with, and your suppliers and your stakeholders, and that's always come through. I think we said earlier, curiosity is one of those things. You just want to know things and want to know things about people, and you're interested in having a chat.
So did that curiosity, because I do rate curiosity. I think it's an extremely important part of the formula of a business person's success in my mind. And it's not a numbers thing in a formula, but I think curiosity is a key element, and it was interesting that you raised it in our Choose Chats and Tunes before.
Yep.
Did that come about by around the kitchen table with your mum and dad and talking about politics and people and the struggles and unions and what have you? Well, how did it come about for you, do you think?
I think well, it probably does through your environment, but I think also always realizing that you don't know very much, right? So,
Yeah.
so I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't rate that I've got smarts at all, but I do rate the fact that I like people and I like understanding things and having a conversation. So most, if not all of my conversations are wanting to know about you, not anything else, or wanting to know about the person that I'm talking to and what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that. I don't think I've got any curiosity that people want to know about me. I just want to know about them. So I want to know about their business, or I want to know about what's going on. And then finding something common, because I like having a chat to people, not necessarily about business. I would prefer to chat about your grandkids or your football team. Whatever. But in a business sense, that forms a relationship.
Yeah, totally.
And immediately that forms a trust. You've got something, you find a common ground. And James, I started, even when we knew each other, I was at one stage in charge of agribusiness in the Commonwealth Bank.
That's
right. Now, you're a country boy, right?
Yeah.
I'm a city bloke. Yeah. So, yeah, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about agriculture, and I find myself in charge of agribusiness. So I'm out on farms and thinking, well, how do I do this? So I worked out very quickly. I'd stand, in next to meet the farmer and be looking at the cows. So I'd say, James, are these boy cows or girl cows? and straight away they go, okay. Right? So he's not pretending.
So we're not frightened to ask a question, right?
Yeah, he's not pretending that he knows anything. And I was saying, I just tell me what I need to know and educate me. And eventually you get that knowledge. But people, you're not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. You don't know things. You don't pretend you know them.
But I love that though, because there is an inhibition amongst us for whatever reason that, it's hard to ask the dumb question. Yeah. And what you're saying is it's just a question you need to ask.
Yep.
And I think that, that's a really important little insight. It seems damn obvious, right? But it's not obvious. And but it opens up a myriad of opportunities and experience, I guess.
Yeah, it did. And that was always a really fun part of the job. And manufacturing, I loved manufacturing. I mean, some people become property bankers, and so I never understood property finance and never really wanted to. It never floated my boat very much, and but manufacturing, infrastructure, really,
because it was more
really
complex in terms of the inputs and the movements.
I could just see outputs in that a little bit easier. That you were making things, and you could get the math behind it, and how much did this cost to make, and then how much do you have to sell it for, and what the margins are. They were very easy to see that you need to sell X number of widgets. Where are you going to sell those to? What the market is. I still do that now when I look at people starting up a coffee shop, in places. I think, well, how many coffees do you have to sell a day to pay the rent? This just isn't going to work.
Some simple economics, right?
It's very, very simple economics. So you can do that in any snack bar or any cafe that you look at. I still do it and thinking, this isn't going to be around. There's not enough people in here. There's not enough people buying it. This is either a front for something or it's not going to last.
Maybe a smoke shop.
That's right.
What vapes? Peter, you got all this experience, right? Like I look at your career, like I don't know how many positions you've had with various banks, and
makes me sound unstable.
Well, that's what I thought. And then I thought, but hold on, I know the guy, and he's the least unstable person I've ever met. Like, I mean, considered is exactly right. Like that's how I experienced you back in the day, which was, I think you said was around about 97 when we worked together. So not unstable at all, right? But you've you've curated a very interesting career by accident or design or both.
Yep.
And I guess it's a journey. 61, you've just retired from People's First Bank. Now, how are you going to utilise that experience in the next chapter?
Very good question. I'm in a very fortunate position, James, of being able to do what I want to do, not needing to do things because I don't want to do things.
Yeah.
But amassing this amount of experience, I would like to continue to give back that experience or the benefit of that experience. And you don't necessarily think you've got a lot until you sit around and talk to people and you think, well, I probably do have a fair bit of experience sitting up there that would be beneficial around an NED sort of career. So I think I would like to, I'd obviously like to do some personal stuff.
Yes.
And there's a lot of hobbies that I'd like to re-engage with. But I think there's also a lot of experience that I think is valuable that I would like to see whether that can't be used in a non-executive director career.
Yeah. Interesting. And I guess the benefit of banking is that, that experience can be applied to a range of different businesses and sectors in a way. I don't know, depending on whether you want to, but so money management is across every industry, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the benefits of these types of positions in banking, it's a very heavily regulated industry.
Yeah.
So you have got that experience of working with regulators.
Yes.
Closely with regulators. Across multiple regulations at the highest levels as well. You'd be struggling, apart from maybe health, to find more regulated industries than finance. And with it comes all of the board governance aspects as well. So of understanding how good boards operate and are structured, and the culture of organisations that then are set from the tone from the top. That's really important as well. And that's probably the area that most interests me now, of how do you take the best of what you've seen, the worst of what you've seen, and then
bring it to fruition.
Bring it to fruition.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I tell the story a bit now. Going back, we used to look at the financials when we were valuing a business, and that's about where we'd start and stop. We'd look at a few other things, but not much. Now we spend half our time doing evaluation. We look at the soft, non-financial related issues, still performance related, but business culture and the way teams are structured and behave and perform. All health factors to do with how sustainable the business is. So, and you've seen the best and the worst of those in terms of what you've been doing.
Yeah.
Fascinating time ahead. Hobbies. We talked about hobbies. Is there any particular ones that are at the top of the list?
Well, I've got family at the top of that list at the moment. So one grandchild and another one on the way.
Wow.
So that's going to take up a little bit of time. And then sport golf is a
big play.
Well, something that has always been part of my makeup.
Your journey.
But I haven't had a chance to reignite that as frequently as I'd like.
So you're going to hone your handicap.
Hopefully, I tell the story. I've got a mate that's a very good sportsman, but we started playing. He started playing golf when he moved up to Noosa, and he wasn't going all that well, but he was gradually getting his handicap down. Now he's regularly breaking 80.
Wow.
And hitting into the low 70.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't think I'll ever be able to do that.
But you've got a bit of a benchmark.
I've got a benchmark. So hopefully reining his lead on me a little bit. And then I had an interest in classic cars, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
want to pursue that a little more, and I want to take up the guitar again. So
really? So you do a bit of headbanging guitar work?
very, very. I've got a couple of guitars, but I learnt guitar as a kid at school, but classical guitar, whereas I always wanted to learn, acoustic guitar.
Oh, really?
But so I'm not even self-taught, but
Yeah.
So it's basically now it's one of those things of getting back into that, and then hitting the travel side as well. So I've got a cruise booked into Scandinavia with a group of friends to celebrate our retirements next year, which will be good. And then I retire on Friday, so heading up to Hamilton Island for a few days just to mark the occasion, and then hit the travel bug around the world.
That's great, Peter. I mean, it's due to you because you put these careers. They don't happen easy, and there's a lot of stress and struggle to do what you've done in terms of the organisational aspects and the management aspects of what a big business is.
Yeah,
and so family is important, and so are things for ourselves. It sounds like a selfish thing, but I think it's very important. I have a last question for you. If you were looking at a young person in their 20s that wanted to get into business, what are the 3 tips that you would give them that you think would help them on their way?
Well, first I would say find someone that you admire, trust, for advice or a mentor along the way.
Yeah.
That might be a family friend, might be uncles, might be a friend of that, but someone that has gone through the journey. You think this is a trustworthy person, and they're open. And I think you will always find that people will offer their services. And I know that my daughter's friends sort of reached out and said, "Can I talk to you?"
Yeah, I need some help. I need to bounce some ideas.
Want to bounce some ideas.
Yeah,
and so get as many of those people around you.
Yeah,
you don't need to follow every piece of advice, but piecing advice together, that you'll find people are there to give you that help. And then I'd say, don't be afraid to give it a go. Every opportunity that's offered to you, I would, my advice is take it. Now that might be more of an employment type of rather than starting a business sometimes, but you get asked to do things that are outside your comfort zone. You don't grow unless you're outside your comfort zone.
So have a crack at it.
Always have a crack. Always have a crack. Always ask people for help. Don't internalize it. If you don't know, just say, "Hey, what do you think I should do here?" And people will help you.
Yeah,
they will help.
Yeah,
you.
Yeah. Nice, Peter. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you,
guest
James.
on Let's Talk Business. I've really enjoyed catching up and making up for lost time.
It's been a while, but it's been great to see you.
Yeah, and congratulations on the journey so far. Some great achievements and some really useful insights for the audience of Let's Talk Business.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Cheers.